Great news for you Barisax fans, we have a new affordable baritone from Bettersax. Now the altos and tenors enjoyed huge success since they were released, and there's been a lot of excitement, anticipation and build-up towards this one. So I'm going to do my usual playing, we're going to study the design, look at the entire package and give you my thoughts in the usual way. So let's just do a basic breakdown of this instrument before we get on and do some playing. So this is a high-level student instrument brought to us by Jay and Bettersax. Some of the key design areas to notice, for a start, we've got this beautiful lacquer, this nice dark cognac-y lacquer, which gives it a distinct appearance. And talking of appearance, we know it's a Bettersax baritone because it has this distinct insignia right here on this brace section at the top. It's a low A baritone, which you can probably guess from this particular visual right here, and it has a top F sharp. Otherwise, as a package, it comes with this new wonderful mouthpiece from Bettersax, which is their Classic, again, a student model, and I'll talk about that one a little bit later. But in the meantime, let's just give it a bit of a sort of technical assessment rather than a musical one. Let's just run up and down some scales, get a general feel for the playability of the instrument. So I really like the general vibe I get from this instrument when I'm just running up and down the instrument. It feels fantastic under the fingers. So playability wise, it's great for the reason that it has a nice light and low key action. Two things that I'm really always looking for when I play a sax, whether it's a soprano, tenor, alto or baritone. And it's particularly great in baritone because baritones are big, heavy, unwieldy beasts. So any assistance you can give this instrument to make it perform in a sort of technical way, shall we say, is very much a good thing. So I love that. And then also just in terms of the key spacing and the comfort left to right hands, it's great. So if we take the left hand first of all, we've got our table keys here, obviously. It's a nice close cluster and it's well positioned. It's very close to the B, A, G, so there's no stretching going on there. Also, whilst I'm on this hand, we have the front F key here. It's not big and bulky like you sometimes get on some baritones, even higher level baritones. It's positioned very well, so easy to move on to. And then also the bis key, sometimes you get these large gaps between the B and the bis. That's just a few mils there, so very easy to maneuver onto the B flat. So that is great. Also, whilst I'm on the left hand, I'm reminded of this rather interesting feature here, the low A key. I've never seen a low A key so slender like this one. At first I thought, oh, that's a bit unusual, but I quite like it. It means we've not got something heavy and bulky that we're operating, but instead something sort of slender and easier to maneuver. I'm sure that must have been the thinking. I've not actually discussed it at all with Jay, but my immediate reaction is, yeah, that works very nicely for me. And actually, when you do that whole low C to low A business, where the A is taking the weight of all those in-between keys, it actually performs that interval very well. So loving the lower A key. And then on the right hand, fingerings, also quite satisfying. I like the closeness again of the E flat and C cluster, nice and close to the F, E and D. So kind of in a way almost designed for small hands and upwards. Works great on this baritone saxophone. Otherwise, it's a light key action. I just mentioned that earlier, but I'll mention it again because that's very important. You don't want stiff key work. It just impedes everything you're trying to do, but it feels light and smooth. And it also, just in terms of the touchdown that you get, I'm just reminded of that there. feels good. It's a nice dull thud. So we've got some good pad work going on here. Pisoni pads, they look like high quality pads. So considering its price point is essentially that of a high student instrument, the spec, the technical spec has been well looked after. One other thing I'm just going to add in terms of the sort of solidity of the build, which is very important to look at this side of things, because now we're talking about the longevity of your baritone. How long will it hold out before it might need servicing and all the rest of it? Well, I'm happy to report that the key work is nice and tight. So when you do this test here, you move these rods up and down. There's no play there, feels very solid. So I'm very satisfied overall with the mechanism, and it responds very well sort of in a technical fashion. So next, let's get on and sort of talk about the sound and actually what this baritone offers in terms of its projection, the layers and the sound, all these things that we enjoy talking about. So that's coming up next. Tone-wise, I'm really enjoying the lush, warm sound that you naturally get on this instrument. And it's also very even from the very low notes up to the top notes on the baritone. Sometimes that can be a problem on baritone saxes, particularly the more sort of cheap end of the scale, where we get sort of lumpy areas where perhaps the tone isn't quite as present, disappears a bit. But on this instrument, I found it very even and smooth, a smooth scale all the way through to the top. So that is absolutely fantastic. Now, before I move on to some other aspects of this instrument, a little shout out to the mouthpiece that I'm using here, because this is the exact one that is paired with the baritone, giving us this beautiful package. This is the new Classic mouthpiece brought to us by Bettersax. It's a student level mouthpiece made from a plastic. So it's not hard rubber, making it expensive, but the performance and the quality that I'm enjoying from this mouthpiece is phenomenal. I think it's great. It's got a smallish tip opening, so if you really hammer the air through it, you're not going to get a massive, big sound that you can get from some of those other premium mouthpieces in wider tips. But the general sound is just a beautiful, warm, layered sound. I think it beautifully pairs with this instrument, so great job there. Now, other aspects to the performance on this instrument. I would say if I had to maybe describe, I don't want to use the word drawback, but we have to accept that there must be some sort of trade-off when we're comparing it with some of the other much more expensive instruments. Perhaps we shouldn't necessarily compare it with those expensive instruments because they're 3 or 4 times the value, those top-level baritones. But given that it's producing a beautiful sound, it's doing all these wonderful things that I'm talking about, there has to be some trade-off element somewhere. And I would say really it's only in the sense that perhaps when you push the air through it and try to max out, you're not going to get that same absolutely massive presence of sound that you might get with a top-level Yamaha or Yanagisawa, for example. But in general terms, the warmth of tone, the change of tonal character that you get as you move from the quiet through to the darks, that evenness of scale that I've mentioned, and also another word I've not brought into the equation up to now, intonation. Intonation is so important. It's often not talked about because sometimes you only find out when you're sitting in the band if you're out of tune or not, and then it can be bad news if you've got this great sounding instrument, but it's not quite in tune. This one is nicely in tune. You do need to set the position of this particular mouthpiece quite far up on the cork, I found out when checking it against the tuning machine. So I've only got a few mils showing for me in the way I play my embouchure, but once I've got it there, the tuning is really centered all the way up through the scale. So that is another great feature of this instrument. So finally there, you just heard me playing another of Jay's products, and this is the Burnin, which of course you'll be familiar with the alto and tenors. Fantastic mouthpieces. And tenor, they now have a metal version. And baritone, we've just got this hard rubber one here, and it does a lot of great things. I wanted to demo this one after you heard me initially on the Classic, because we get a much fuller, more ballsy sound. And actually, talking of projection and those aspects of sound and projection that I mentioned with the more expensive instruments, adding a mouthpiece like this to this more high-level student instrument is a great way to maximize its potential. And you can hear it really does kick out and sound very premium level, really, with a mouthpiece like this. So the Classic, lovely, warm, fuzzy sound, but a lot more sort of hardness and edge, as well as that body in the sound of this Burnin mouthpiece. So you've heard all of Jay's products or mouthpieces now in conjunction with this new baritone. And let's just wrap it up by saying, really overall, this is a very well-made, enjoyable baritone saxophone to play that sits at a nice, affordable price point. And I think it's going to interest a lot of you players who've perhaps not had baritone saxophone experience, but you're very excited to get into the world of baritone sax. I've read a lot of comments where there's been a lot of build-up and excitement, as I said earlier, towards this new release. You know, I think coming from players who've perhaps never dabbled in baritone, have always tried alto and tenor, but have been fascinated by the beauty of the sound of the baritone sax, and certainly this baritone will deliver all of that and more for you.